and welcome to a very special episode of The Information's TITV. I'm Jessica Lessin, Editor-in-Chief of The Information, and we're coming to you off schedule to talk about the major decision in the Google antitrust case. This is big news with, I think, ramifications not just for Google, but for the tech industry as a whole. And so we could not sit on our hands and wait until tomorrow's broadcast, where we'll obviously have a lot more to say about this, and wanted to bring you some of our analysis this evening. I could not be joined by anyone better on this topic than The Information's co-executive editor, Amir Efrati. Amir, welcome to TITV.
Let's get rolling, Jess.
Let's get rolling. So should we give the viewer a little bit, before we get into unpacking this case, I think we need to unpack our experience with the Goog, shall you say, because I started covering Google in 2005 for the Wall Street Journal, where we were both reporters. And I believe you were covering the law at the time, so gives you a seat at this table from that perspective. And when I moved on to other pastures, you took over as the Wall Street Journal's Google beat reporter. Collectively, I think we have been following this company for more than 20 years, and tonight's a big night. So let's get into it. What stood out to you? First impressions, this decision comes down. We've been waiting for many months, if not longer. Many cases were combined. At stake here was whether Google would be broken up, have to spin off Chrome, as well as its very important Apple search deal. Give us your immediate takeaways.
Well, in summary, this is a complete and total victory for Google, almost, with the ruling today from Amit Mehta in the district court. And, just to be very clear, the Justice Department, which won the initial case against Google last year with Judge Mehta saying Google, yes, is an illegal monopolist in search, it wanted first and foremost to stop Google's $20 billion a year in payments to Apple. That was the big thing, because when you and I were covering Google, Microsoft and all the Google companies were saying, well, Google is a monopoly in search and it's preferencing its own vertical websites and results, and it's not fair, and it's a public utility and all this. That really didn't go anywhere. But what did get somewhere was this big deal with Apple to be the default search provider for Safari, which has been certainly incredibly lucrative for Apple, and Google wouldn't have done it if it wasn't important for Google to do it as well. And this decision basically says that deal cannot be exclusive. So maybe Apple has to do like a symbolic deal with Yahoo or Bing or something, but it's not going to prevent these payments from continuing. It's not going to prevent this deal from continuing, where Google is essentially the default, search provider for Safari. And then, like you said, they don't have to spin off Chrome, the browser. They don't have to spin off Android or anything of that sort. There were all these other things that the Justice Department wanted. They didn't get any of it. The only thing they did get, which is worth getting into, is that Google will be required to hand over, I think for a marginal fee, some data from its search index, so that other companies, whether it's Bing or OpenAI or Perplexity or Anthropic, can essentially create a search competitor with a long tail of kind of web scraped data to be able to provide people with information when they ask for it. That's kind of the main. That's the main.
So let's kind of go backwards a little bit. Let's talk about this concession, this win. I mean, is this like the equivalent of saying, yes, you can't have the iPhone, but you can have the mold for the shape of the iPhone, right? Is it so surface level, especially with how, Google's search effects have compounded, or is it more meaningful? Because we do know, and AI, we'll get to in a second, played a huge role in this decision. I think bigger than I certainly expected. And maybe that's where some of the implications for other cases out there, lessons could be learned from this. But is that long tail data going to create a formidable competitor to Google search? Or
at this point, Google as a brand is pretty synonymous with search. I'm not sure why DuckDuckGo having a better, set of results, or Bing having a better results, or Yahoo through Bing having a better set of results really changes that market. I do think it helps OpenAI and ChatGPT become a better search competitor, although OpenAI was finding a way to get scraped Google
Yep.
data, Google search data anyway.
We had that
So
exclusive last week with the
right,
information.
right. And so so yeah, it's hard to know whether this is going to be meaningful. There were witnesses who testified in the last part of this trial, the remedies phase of the trial after the monopoly determination had been made as far as like what would kind of remedy or fix that monopoly. A bunch of folks said that, whether it was, Apple or OpenAI or others were saying that it would be important for them to have this search data for a fee from Google. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that this really changes that much. There's a reason why Google stock shot up immediately, seven and a
Yeah.
half percent. Apple
Yeah.
stock up 3% after hours immediately after this decision for good reason.
So let's talk about AI a bit. I mean, I love, and for all our, if you're watching TITV, you are a close reader of the technology sector. You should read the decision. There's a lot of good stuff in there, including like chastising the government for even asking for the divestiture of Chrome, which I thought was interesting from the judge. But we talked about Gen AI reshaping the landscape. And this jumped out at me because, again, in 20 years of covering Google, and I remember one of my first scoops was when Google was barred from doing a Yahoo search deal. This is way back in the day when Yahoo was in play. Microsoft was trying to buy it. Yahoo rushes to Google to try and save them from Microsoft. And the Justice Department said, no, 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 you guys can't do a search deal at that time. So, but the argument from big tech, and it's the same whether it's Google, Amazon, Apple, Meta, is just that competition is a looming, that just around the corner is the new thing, whether it's AI imposing a new threat. And, critics of big tech would say that big tech has used this reasoning to sort of escape accountability or scrutiny by always pointing to this. But here we have a judge pointing exactly to that next shiny object as, part of the reason to not restrict Google further. What did you make of that language and rationale?
Well, OpenAI won this case for Google, and it's pretty incredible that, most of the firms in Silicon Valley, including these big tech firms, they are run by, a certain brand of free market capitalist. And this decision, could not be more aligned with that view, which is that when you think about these kind of antitrust cases and issues, they're so backward looking that by the time they're done, the world has kind of changed. And Judge Mehta agreed with that essentially, and almost raised the whole question of like, why did we go through this entire process to begin with? The initial trial where he determined that Google was an illegal monopolist ended in November 2023. ChatGPT was a thing, but it was still in its relative infancy. Since then, it is obviously, jumped by an order of magnitude or more in terms of the people who are using it. But going back to what you were saying before about kind of big tech and kind of compounding advantages, it's not as if this new landscape is going to be the complete and utter decimation of Google. Its advantages persist. And I think part of this case definitely got into that, which is why Judge Mehta is saying, yes, you have to give OpenAI your search data and give them a better chance to compete, because Google is essentially taking its gigantic, greatest business ever created, canon and training it, toward AI in terms of bringing AI results and making Google search more like ChatGPT. It's able to do that, in ways that no other company really can. Now, there are limits to it. Obviously, ChatGPT is growing like a weed, and but so far, it has not crushed Google. So far, Google is taking these baby steps toward, having a better product that gives you the kind of results you want or you have come to expect, especially if you use ChatGPT. So they were going to be okay anyway. This decision just absolutely reinforces this idea that Google is going to be fine. And now they don't have all these distractions. If you think about if they would have had to divest things or kill the Apple deal, I mean, putting aside the insanity it would have been for Apple, it just means that they don't have to be distracted anymore. I don't even know if they're going to appeal this decision. It was so good for them. So
That's a good question.
yeah,
There are some other cases, not as important, right? But talk through those. They're not totally out of the woods.
yeah, there is an ad tech case which is really all about Google's advantages in advertising technology and how it has essentially kind of tried to rig advertising auctions and find a way to get more and more margin from the way that it helps companies buy and sell inventory across the web. There is a serious thought of having to kind of spin out part of that business, but it is a part of the business that Google has been kind of deprecating anyway and is not as critical. This was really the case. This was really going to be the moment. And I think this is a huge, huge crushing blow to the people who brought this case to begin with. I think companies like Microsoft are probably quite disappointed given the decade and a half work that they put into this. But yeah, that's where we
We've
are.
got to get Luther Lowe on the line. Maybe we dial him up. And you're right. I mean, not that. I mean, obviously, the tech regulatory wheel will turn, and these massive companies. We were just talking in our edit meeting this morning about how do you regulate AI and how do you think about responsible AI and all these questions. The scrutiny is not going to go away, but let's shift gears a little bit and just talk about this moment of regulation in the Valley. I mean, we're waiting a Meta breakup case decision from the FTC. I think I've lost track. We need our regulatory tracker back on here. Under the Biden administration, there was this steady drumbeat of it was looking like everyone was headed for their big breakup case. Again, many of these obviously way predate the Trump administration, to your point. In general, the Trump administration seems like it's backed off on a lot of areas like privacy, but I kind of feel like there's a little bit of a collective sigh across all the big tech companies this evening, because really also, I mean, when you talk to the CEOs of these companies, yes, this product launch and that product launch, but it's really the breakups that they know are at the end of the road, right? It's hard to imagine you're going to have 10, $50 trillion companies eventually, right? So like this breakup notion does hang sort of existential. And it was kind of feeling like this, was going to be a little chip off the old Google, or am I making too much of it, right? Is each case individual here?
Well, even in the worst case scenario, it's a sort of thing where even if you do have to break off an Android or a Chrome, the existing Google shareholders get a piece of that, and they're going to do just fine. These are inherently valuable.
CEO wants to be broken up.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean that's the shareholders can make a case, but we're not. But it's a different landscape, right? When if were these companies to be cleaved off, right? Or
Yeah, for sure. And look, the Meta situation, I mean, these are deals that happened like 15 years ago
right.
or longer. It just seems really hard to believe, especially given what we saw in the Google case, that suddenly a judge is going to require Meta to spin off WhatsApp or Instagram.
Or Instacart. Graham.
Yeah.
Tired. Yeah, and Meta has always felt quite confident about that case, but we'll see. I mean, I think these things tend to happen in waves a little bit, and so it's certainly one of many messages. Acquisitions are back, a little bit of collective relief. Before we go, because we've got stories to edit and publish shortly, but let's talk about Google. You said earlier that it's a sign sort of not to count them out. Maybe people have been too hard. Certainly, the stock has been at a relative discount to other big tech companies, maybe because of regulatory kind of overhang, Gemini inching along. What's your view? I mean, do you think that the public being both Wall Street and the sort of insider tech had turned too negative about Google and this changes that, or do you still see reasons, to be concerned?
Well, there's the general concern around ChatGPT, and once it starts monetizing through advertising, what kind of a bite if
Yeah.
any, is that going to take out of Google? But no, I mean, Google is going to be a, top two, top three company in whatever this kind of combined AI and search paradigm is going to be. So they're here and they're not going anywhere. So from that standpoint, it seems like they're going to be fine, and they're
But will they be a monopoly, right? I mean, I think that's, and it's interesting because that brings us back. I remember,
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe a year ago, 6 months ago, Brad Gerstner, the investor who was one of the first to sort of turn more negative on Google, right? And basically said, ChatGPT's here, Google's monopoly days are numbered, and therefore, you just can't value the company the same way.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. If you're looking at it from like a, price to earnings ratio kind of thing, yes, there are implications here. At the same time, Google Cloud is growing like gangbusters. It is not a massive, massive profit center, although it is getting better in that sense. You've got kind of Waymo in the background that's looming. If it could scale, that's a
All not in the background. I mean, by our office
yeah,
20
it's
times a day. Yeah.
it's outside our office, but in the
20
back.
times an hour, actually.
So, they do have all these other potential tailwinds, as analysts like to say. But you're right. I mean, the era of Google, completely owning the most lucrative, profitable, um, you know, business or product that's ever been created, that is starting to change for sure. So from a valuation perspective, I think there is a bit of an adjustment, but man, all these like compounding effects of being who they are and acquiring what they've acquired and being able to subsidize these newer
Yeah.
businesses for as long as they have. The fact that Google, as a consumer company, has been able to subsidize and slog it out on the cloud infrastructure side for as long as it has, to now becoming a player that is able to have OpenAI as a customer and Meta Platforms as a customer.
It's crazy.
That's incredible. It's an incredible thing
I
that
remember years ago when I think you broke the story, and I should add for our listeners, Amir has been at the information 12 years. We've been doing this. So we've written a lot of Google stories, but you had a story saying that Google had set some sort of goal. If wasn't hit, they were going to shut down Google Cloud, right? There was that much skepticism and pressure. And I think to your point, its growth has been a major story of the last 3 months, and it's sort of strategic wrangling with some of its competitors. So yeah, well, I've always believed that you can't count Google out. So, but it is, which seems silly to say because it's Google, but it is interesting to see such a decisive win. I mean, I'm also interested, if you briefly indulge me my media criticism hat too, how outlets have been covering it this evening, because many outlets like the New York Times were quick to just point to the search licensing or search data sharing as, a blow delivered by the Justice Department. And I mean, to me, as soon as I got a text from Martin Peers in New York saying decisions out, I just said Apple Chrome. Like, those are the two things that matters, right? Does it keep Chrome? Does it keep the Apple deal? And such a clear victory. So it's interesting. I think you have a range. We're in a moment of a wide range of media coverage, and some people will be quick to point out again, and we should, those areas where it's not just business as usual for Google, but as with most things tech, it's really a question of what's needle moving and what the company is very happy to change to make the case go away. So as you said, I think Sundar should buy Sam a beer tonight, or 20,
Tim
because
Cook should also,
Tim Cook too.
yeah.
Big thanks, big emoji prayer, going back and forth on the iMessage. But it's will be very interesting to see, if we get some more reaction from Google. Given there's continued litigation, they probably aren't going to be beating their chest, but it was a significant deal, one that was a long time coming, both in the verdict and now in the decision and the remedies. So Amir, thanks so much for joining. We should keep the Jessica and Amir show going on TITV. There's actually been a request for us just to debate each other, since we have some healthy disagreements on these
We'll
topics.
bring Martin Piers in here and it'll be an explosion.
It will just be boisterous. But with that, thanks everybody for tuning into this special episode of TITV. I'm Jessica Lessin, and we will have more to say at our regularly scheduled time, Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. We'll see you then.